Well, this is a talk I put together several years ago, but I thought it was a good one for this time of year. Uh, that uh, that may be a little bit lighter of a program, but I call it Desert and Glass. And this is the um, Chihuly exhibit at the Desert Botanic Garden. And because of the grandkids out there, we get out to Phoenix quite often and got to see it both in 2008 and in 2013 when it was at the Desert Botanic Garden out there in Phoenix. To start, just a few pictures of what the Botanic Garden looks like in the winter. Yeah, even the Botanic Garden has a somewhat dormant look to it in the wintertime. And some years when you go out, you can see in the background here with mesquite and so forth, you'll get a lot of foliage. And other years when it's drier, there won't be quite as much. But the plants are at the dormant stage, but still looking very, very good. Instead of flowers, there are some flowers out there in December, but of course it's a time when you see more seed pods on the cactus. Mule grass is a species of grass native to the Southwest and used in landscapes out there. And it's about a zone 6. So it's not one that's really safe here in Ohio. And it prefers a drier landscape. And the winter show is very, very attractive. Just other views of the area. The Stenoceros is in bloom even in the wintertime when we go out there. Of course, this is late May or June when the saguaros are in bloom. In the wintertime, they're more dormant. But because we get out there at different times of year, we get to see them at those different seasons. It's interesting to watch the birds come in for the seed. And even this woodpecker, apparently drinking the nectar out of the saguaro flower. And the Pachycereus pringling-eyes, hopefully we've got our flight tickets, so hopefully we'll get to see the Pachycereus pringling-eye coming into what seed pods and coming into bloom. Here they are at the Desert Botanic Garden, but these are native down in on the Baja. More on they tend to be the residents of the San Jose side or the Sierra Cortez side of the mountains, and the west side of the mountains on the Pacific side is more Pecten aboriginum. So Pachycereus pringling-eye and Pecten aboriginum will be found on the western, which is the Sonoran part of the desert down on the Baja, and on the west side, it is more of a tropical scrub. But it's interesting how the species can be somewhat variable, and some will be found on both sides. Even birds found, we see a lot of crested eagles when we drive the west side.
Yes.
But do not see them on the west side. And this particular plant is only listed as a bunch of species out there, and had the chance to see it in bloom with its pink flowers. Of course, in the wintertime, it's the seed pods that put on the show. But then occasionally we'll see Pharaoh Cactus still will have blooms in the winter. But mostly in summer. And Pharaoh Cactus latispinus, this is a small growing Pharaoh Cactus, and one that can pretty well be bloomed in a collection in a 6-inch pot. the Cactus grusonii in there at the garden. Of course, these are summer bloomers and they're in seed in the wintertime. And the aloes, of course, at Desert Botanic Garden really put on a show at this time of year. The Euphorbias is, I believe it's actually a hybrid, a natural occurring hybrid. And it's one of my favorite aloes. I have one in my own collection. And mine usually blooms around show time. And I usually bring the plant in when we have our shows at the end of March. And the Idrias, too far north for us to reach by car when we go down to Cabo, where these are more about halfway up the peninsula. So not one that I'll probably, unless we do a long overnight and 2 long day drives to get up to where the Idri are. Now at the Botanic Garden, several years ago, they did put in a new shade house that is very well done. And part of it is for cacti and another part is for more of the succulents. And this is the part of the shade house that is for the cactus. So this is the New World shade house. And of course, there's the animals with the lizards, jackrabbits, a lot of quail, generally to be seen walking around the Botanic Garden. And these plant bugs, actually, this was a summer shot I did a few years back. And when you see an insect with that much color, it's saying, don't eat me, I don't taste good. Not to show off who they are. And of course, the Euphorbias and some very nice selections of Euphorbias out there at the garden as well. And Cyphostemas, this is a spring shot where it's coming up and into bloom. Mine in the greenhouse, which is start raised from seed, and now it's about 2 foot tall. It's going dormant. And the Deuteroconias, these are Brazilian terrestrial bromeliads. They've been in the genus Dicea, and now they're Deuteroconias. I still carry the label Abromyciella on 3 different forms of what are now Deuteroconias. Mound forming plants that the heads are maybe 2 inches across, and but the clump can be 2 feet across. Small greenish yellow flowers when they bloom. And I grow this in pots, but I also like putting it in. It makes a nice basket with a mounding habit. And lithops. They have a few lithops in the old world shade house, which is mostly African succulents, and where they have them planted outside. A lot of good agaves out there and a lot of the new hybrid cultivars as well on display. And Calliandras, this is a plant that is native to Arizona, and we see it out there, growing around Phoenix, but we also see it in bloom when we go down to Cabo. So it should, if there was enough rain, and it was a very rainy year last year down in Cabo, about as green as I've ever seen it. Some years it's so dry, there's rarely any foliage at all. But generally I can find some of these when I go out walking in the mountains. I can find these in bloom. And the wildflowers out there, not so much in the wintertime, but again, this is a late spring or early summer shot in the wildflower garden. And of course, many different types of lizards. But in 2008, Chihuly put in the first display at the Desert Botanic Garden. Nance and I have had a chance to see pieces of the Chihuly exhibit or the exhibit itself in many different botanic gardens, including Franklin Park Conservatory, of course, down in Columbus. It's been down there a couple times. I've seen it at Fairchild down in Miami, at the Shaw Botanic Garden in St. Louis. And a couple of years ago when we visited the Chelsea Flower Show, we saw it on display at Kew Gardens. But it was hands down the best display is where they hit it out of the park, was display at the Desert Botanic Garden. I had the chance to sit with the director and talk to him a little bit about the display in 2008. And he informed me that when they made the decision, first of all, to invite Chihuly into a botanic garden, it takes $500,000 just to start discussing putting in a display. But it takes a lot of infrastructure work at a botanic garden with security and so forth to put an incredible display on that Chihuly can do. And what the director told me was that their investment for this, the 2008 display was $4 million. It ran from October to May from 2008 into 2009. And it was so popular what they did. You bought a 4-hour slot and had tickets to go in and for a 4-hour time period. So there were 3 of these in the period of a day. And we chose the 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock because I wanted to be able to photograph during the day and then after dark as well. And a lot of people coming into the garden to see the display. Here you can see late afternoon, and you can, if you look at that landscape, you can tell it's wintertime. And one of the large pieces that is put in is called the sun. You'll see it also, if you remember their structure, you'll see how it changed in 2013. The basic structure was the same, but it'll look very, very different. All those are individual pieces. Here it is in 13, the same structure. And that year we got out to the garden. This is around the 1st of November because we usually go out to see the boys around Halloween, and got the opportunity to see them putting the exhibit together. Oops. Here you can see the structure put around and all the boxes with the pieces. Also the metal structure is the interior part of it, and how with the rebar here, the glass slides over and put into place, each one as an individual. We also saw the taking it apart in around the first week of June of 2014 when we were back out. And I think there were 7 semis lined up in the parking lot to move the material back up into Washington, or maybe to the next place it was going to be exhibited. Here's some of the pieces. This is a combination of the 2 times that we had the opportunity to see it. It was interesting when I went back in 2013 as a member of the Holden Arboretum and the Cleveland Botanic Garden. For those of you who are members, and it is a a good thing to be a member because it gives you reciprocity when you visit different gardens. And so when we go out to the Desert Botanic Garden, all I have to do is use my Holden card or my American Horticultural Society. I think I have 3 different organizations I belong to, which gives me reciprocity when I visit the Botanic Garden. But when there's a particular exhibit like this, it gets me in the garden, but nope, it won't get me in for this. But in 2013, the taxonomist from Holden, who was a friend of mine, was out visiting his brother. And he and I decided to go down together that day. And when I got there, I used my card and they said, well, you're going to have to pay. And Ethan brought out his card as an employee of the Botanic Garden, and we both walked in for free. So sometimes it's who you know that gets you where you want to go. Here's another art that this between the 2 shade houses, the Old World and the New World houses, and this was the display in 2008 on that in that area. And this is I think this is 2008. But I've been fascinated with his glass for many, many years. And it's very interesting that he does most of his exhibits in botanic gardens. It takes a few weeks to set up all the pieces. Here, these pieces, these neodymium rods were used to complement the vertical cacti in the background. I think this was one of my favorite pieces. But the Cactus straussii in the background combined the silver of the spines combined with the blue of the blue fiddleheads. And this is that same plaza area in 2013 in October under construction. Looked a little different in December. And that's temporary garden put in just for the exhibit. And then some of the chandeliers, very, very interesting. And they are massive. That one there was probably 8 or 10 feet from top to bottom. Looks a little different at night than it does during the day. And this is the biggest piece I think I've seen at any of the gardens I've been. This is this was probably 10 or 12 feet top to bottom. And this was in the old world house, the succulent house. Here with the hyster in there, the high lift, when it was under construction in October, and then back in December. There you can get an idea of how big that piece is. And I like Aloe Dorothea, and I've got this plant. I have trouble getting the reds into it. With sunlight, this will take on a beautiful bright red coloration. And my plants tend to stay green. Probably watering them a little too much in the summer, keeping them a little, if you want to say, too healthy and growing. And need to stretch them out a little bit to get the color. But these are all winter pictures of aloes in bloom, right around Christmas. That aloe ferox, theirs is orange, mine is yellow, and it's a plant I've had since 1950 as a seedling in a 2.5-inch pot. Mine will not be in bloom till about February. And this, I like this Trichosantha. I don't have this in my collection, but look at the fuzzy buds on the flowers. Aloe Wickensia is another plant I've probably raised maybe 50 years ago from seed. But I think I've bloomed it once in my greenhouse, and most of the seedlings remain solitary, and I have one particular seedling. Of course, it's 40, 50 years old, but now that one branches. And Aloe dichotoma, the quiver tree. I frustrated because I did not get into this part of South Africa to see this species in habitat. Maybe someday. The float boat, different in the tier. I've seen this used in different gardens, and always filled with different pieces of glass. But just the amazing number of pieces, it just blows your mind. And how different it looks with night lights. And these like floating icebergs. And this is a wetland restoration at the Botanic Garden, and with plenty of frogs. As the light changes. I remember seeing some of these big glass balls at Franklin Park Conservatory They had them floating in the pool of water in the one conservatory. Harry, maybe you can remember some of those down there. At night, they take on a different aspect totally. It looks so different at night than it does during the day. And that's a visit with Chihuly and Desert and Glass.